All right. Good afternoon, everyone. And here we are on Tuesday. It's the last Tuesday of June. Where did the month of June go? I don't talk about that at home because my wife is an 8th grade math teacher and she doesn't want to know that Target is starting to sell school supplies and all those good things. So hopefully you're here for all things SOPPA. This will be recorded so that you can um, watch it back and listen to my pleasant voice in 2 times speed um, as we as you review what we talked about today. Um, the slide deck is always available at LTC or bit.ly/LTC underscore all things SOPA ATS. And we won't have a session next Tuesday. And then I will join you from the Lake of the Ozarks on July 13th, live from the Lake of the Ozarks to talk about all things SOPA. The YouTube playlist is where all the recordings are, so you can find information that we talked about in today's session. I'll be on that YouTube playlist. And as always, my contact information is there so that you can schedule a meeting with me. I'm finding that the meetings work out very well because, again, when I get emails and I respond to that email, I'm getting 3 or 4 return emails in return. And so it ultimately ends up being a 15-20 minute conversation through email that probably would have been better through scheduling a time, even though those times will be limited over the next couple of weeks. Definitely schedule a time, email me. Those are the primary ways of working through some of this stuff. So the slideshows here also in the chat, I put the link to slido.com and the code is Z972. So if you would join using that code and participate in my polls, that would be great. So what your comfort level is with SOPA at this point. Some of you may be just getting started and beginning to do this. Others have been part of our conversation since we started in February. And so hopefully we're getting more towards that 4 and 5 and at least 3 on the scale here. So the main reason I do this, not necessarily to see ultimately how we're doing. I mean, that's one reason is to learn here, but to learn how you're doing, but also because we're going to use this Slido for question and answer as we go along. So appreciate you putting in that information, and I'm glad to see that we're moving that score higher. As we began, it was in the 2s, and now we're at 3.7. So very scientific poll right there to show how we're doing. And then I always like to just show people what roles people are in, just because I think it's important to see that there's different roles taking part in this process. And I know it's difficult to say what role we're in some cases because we have multiple roles, but I think it's important that we see that it's not just a technology issue, that it's also a curriculum issue, it's an administrative issue, it's what we're doing for the kids, and that takes all of us to be a part of that conversation. So, and as Sean says in the chat, it does take a village. But we won't get too sentimental here. All right. So, and I just wanted, as we wrap up June 2021, and we are on the, how many days are we away? 2 days away from July 1st, 2021. What's your one word about SOPA at this point? I know in the past, the word has always been overwhelm, and I don't know why that's not showing the results for that. Let's go back. Is it because I didn't hit present on Slido? Well, that's a bummer. I guess you'll just have to put it in chat. All right, so we'll get on with what we're doing here. Put your one word in chat, and just that way you guys can all see it, and I'll try to block that out because that'll be distracting. So as always, the reason for Slido is so that you can put your questions and answers here, and we will come back to the question and answer at the about 2:30, maybe a little bit before that. So definitely put your questions in there. You can vote questions up and down and participate that way. Usually the first question is, for those that are just starting this process, is what is SOPPA? And we have a web page that really has a lot of information on it to help you with those conversations, and share these resources with your counterparts at your school, at your administrative council meetings, different areas within your school, to have conversations around what is SOPPA and who should be participating in this. There's a few different things with SOPPA that we need to really be concerned with. One is any application that we're using in the K-12 environment that has personally identifiable information for students needs to have a data privacy agreement. And so that written agreement needs to be posted on your website. It needs to include things like data elements and what the services being offered are with that application. And as we get into this, and as you start getting into the nitty gritty, you'll start questioning, well, what about this app and what about that app? And that's a difficult question to answer because the law is written so that it says K-12 purposes for the application, but ultimately, if you're sharing student information, ultimately you should be concerned what they're doing with that information, and whether or not you have to have a data privacy agreement. It's something to have on your list, and know that you're sharing information with those particular applications. Another thing that is a big part of it that we kind of don't really talk a lot about is the reasonable security practices that school districts should use. So make sure that you're at least acknowledging that there are things that you need to be doing as a district, and begin knocking those things off as well. And then there's some additional information there from Robin Schwartz. It's a legal firm in Illinois. They've done a couple different webinars and different things. So there's a couple of resources there for you to reference as well. And the weekly agenda, this is just what we cover during these sessions. And it's really meant to be there for somebody that just joins the slideshow and sees what's happening there, to understand what we're doing during this time. This slide is really meant for you to understand that you're not alone in this process, that there's a lot of things happening, a lot of good things happening. There may be a few incorrect or not frustrating things that are happening because of certain things that are being uploaded or not correctly, or in the wrong place, or not completely filled out, and those types of things. But I think if we look at the database and we look at the numbers and where we've come from February 9th all the way through the end of June, we have 730 school districts that have accounts now. There's been 3 more that have joined since noon when I pulled this data. So that's an encouraging number. That includes private schools, special ed schools or special ed co-ops, vocational schools, ROEs, as well as school districts. So that number is is representative. It's not totally representative of the 853 school districts. There's way more in the system than just the 853 school districts. So 727 isn't 727 out of 853, but that is a good number to represent what we're doing throughout the state. And at some point, I should pull the school districts and put it on a map just to show that it's all across the state that people are joining and utilizing the database that we're able to use through the Student Data Privacy Consortium. The signed DPAs, again, just looking at those numbers, over 2,500 new agreements since last Tuesday. And if you look at the 517, that number represents the number of districts that have actually uploaded a DPA. So that number going up is encouraging as well, meaning that of those 727, 517 have actually at least executed one agreement, whether it's subscribing to an Exhibit E or subscribing to an originating agreement, or if it's uploading an agreement like Khan Academy or something like that. So the 1070 represents the number of originating agreements that have been uploaded. That is not unique applications. So in some cases, like Skyward is uploaded 9 times as an originating agreement. And so that number is skewed a little bit. That's not actual applications, but that's still representative of a good number of applications. And I'm trying to parse the numbers to figure out exactly how many applications that really means. The unique resource requests, those numbers represent if you put in a new resource request into the system as a district to work through the workflow, that would be a unique resource in that list. And so but that doesn't, I'm probably going to take that number off there because it's not really representative of anything that we're doing. It's kind of, if the numbers were coming out of that list, like if they were going down and people were actually taking out the request that they're entering into agreements for, then that number would be closer to, hopefully it gets closer to 0. It is going down a little bit, but ultimately that number should go down to 0 as agreements get put in the database and the requests become agreements. So this slide represents the new agreements that are originating agreements that should show up in the Auto Exhibit E creator. So as originating agreements get uploaded into the database, then they should be available in the Auto Exhibit E creator to allow you to subscribe to them. So these are the latest originating agreements. And so it's just a way for you to see different applications that are available for you to subscribe to and use as a checklist. And actually over the last couple of weeks, we've had a couple slides with information on it because there's too much to put on one. So another student information system, Tyler Technologies, is in there. So just look at those, and also if you look at the archives link up here, it takes you to past weeks slides that would represent that as well. So anything that shows up on this page, on these 2 pages, should ultimately be in the Auto Exhibit E creator. So as we look at the databases and putting agreements in and all that type of stuff, I just want to show some samples of websites and put these in here for future reference for people to be able to look at, but just as representative of a couple different school districts, what they've been putting on their websites, just information so that you can copy what they're doing and put the information on your website. And then ultimately sharing the link of what the end result is of putting information into the database so that you can see it on your public site. So this is an example of Glenview School District's SDPC database entries. So they've got their agreements here. It shows the resources that they have, and then the agreements that they have, and then what data elements are associated with each one of those particular applications. And ultimately, you can put grade level information in there. You can put content area information, subject area information in there as well. So there's just good examples of a couple different pages. If you have examples of things that you're doing, don't hesitate to share those with me, and I'll share those on here. More information is better, so that people can see what other people are doing and pick and choose what they want to do as far as displaying that information. As far as agreements, I think this is an important thing to keep going over, is just to continue to talk about what the different types of agreements are. When you're uploading a new agreement, primarily you're going to do, at this point, primarily what you're going to do is uploading an agreement is going to be an originating agreement. You really don't need to go to add a new agreement to subscribe to an Exhibit E, because you should be able to do that through the Auto Exhibit E creator. So when you do go to upload an originating agreement, if you're the district that has the originating agreement, you're the district listed on the cover page. The Exhibit E is signed by the vendor to allow other school districts to subscribe and piggyback onto this full agreement. Then you, as that district, would upload the full agreement and use the checklist that I'll talk about in a minute to make sure that all the different areas are filled out, and then supply the email address when you're uploading it, and supply the one-page Exhibit E that allows other school districts to subscribe. And there is a video there. Thank you, Sean Mullins, for making those videos. And the video will show you how to upload that agreement. And it's important that that information is uploaded accurately. It's only uploaded by the originating district. It doesn't need to be uploaded. If you're subscribing to a agreement, you are then the subscribing district. You're not the originating district. And if you're a subscribing district, then you can use the Auto Exhibit E creator to do that. So make sure that you're, if you're the originating district, if you have any questions about uploading an agreement, that you can reach out to me and I can help, or watch that video as well, to make sure that that step gets done correctly and accurately, so that the Auto Exhibit E creator can do its job and make sure that people can subscribe to that. So with the Auto Exhibit E creator, once an originating agreement has been uploaded, once the Auto Exhibit E creator has that agreement, I lost my train of thought here. Okay, once the district has uploaded the original agreement, then it should show up in the Auto Exhibit E creator. In the Auto Exhibit E creator, then a district can go in and sign that Exhibit E, which ultimately means that they're signing the one-page document that the vendor signed. It's blank at the bottom. The system is going to sign that with the account that's logged in, and then email that document to the email address that's supplied by the originator. And then it's posted to your website so that you can see that agreement. So when you go to your website, just as the examples were shown there, the full agreement would be the top link. The bottom agreement will be the Exhibit E that will be signed by the person that clicked on the Sign Exhibit E button within the Auto Exhibit E creator. The third type of agreement, and I know I'm running through these fast, and but we do have videos for all this stuff. We do have 1 hour videos as well within the playlist to look at that, and then you can always rewind this and check this out as well. But the other type of agreement is just a standalone agreement. That means that there's no Exhibit E. So the vendor doesn't want to have districts just sign on to an Exhibit E and sign on to that agreement. They want a district to sign a separate agreement for each district. And two examples of that: one is Khan Academy. Khan Academy has their own agreement in the database. And you'll see that if you search for Khan Academy in the View All State DPAs, because Khan Academy will not show up in the Auto Exhibit E creator. So when you search View All State DPAs, you'll see an example of an agreement that is there from several different schools. And then you use that information to help determine how to get that agreement. So in the sense of Khan Academy, if you look through the agreement, there's an email address. And I haven't verified this, but I assume that you just email that email and request a data privacy agreement for Illinois, and they will send that to you. Ultimately, because that's not in the form of the Illinois NDPA, and as a district, you should have the Illinois NDPA vetted by your attorney, so that you can do all the subscribing and everything with the Auto Exhibit E creator. But because the Khan Academy agreement is not in that format, you should have that looked at by your attorney before you sign that and post it to your site. The other example is GoGuardian. GoGuardian has actually used the Illinois NDPA agreement to enter into agreements with individual schools, but they did not sign the Exhibit E. So they choose to use the full document. They want you to communicate with them, get an agreement and sign it, and upload it individually, but not through the subscribing process. So again, you shouldn't see GoGuardian in the Auto Exhibit E creator, but it is in the format of the Illinois NDPA. It does have an Exhibit H, so you would need to have at least the Exhibit H vetted by your attorney. This checklist is available to you to kind of go through the agreements and just look at them. Ultimately, best case scenario is that the originating district did a thorough job doing all this and posting this, or when they posted the originating agreement, that they went through this checklist and really made sure that it was accurate and filled out, and so that when you go into the database as the Auto Exhibit E creator or the subscribing district, that it's pretty straightforward, that you can just kind of go down through this list and see, okay, yes, there's an Exhibit A, yes, there's an Exhibit B, yes, the Exhibit E signed, yes, there's an Exhibit F, and there is an Exhibit H. So that you're just kind of, the more we do this, the better it's going to be. And as we go over time, I'm sure we're going to get better at doing all this stuff. Right now, there's a lot going on, and so we need to just do the best we can. And as we do find things that are inaccurate or confusing, or something's just not right, definitely reach out to me and let me know, and we'll work to get those things right. As for the database and for the system itself, as always, since the beginning of this webinar or the session that we've been doing for all things SOPPA, definitely use this link to provide feedback to SDPC as they are out for a quote for revision of the system, or they're also looking at doing, over the time that it would take to do a revision, fixing some things within the system that's available now. So if you do have feedback, you do have comments, definitely share those with SDPC as far as things that can make it better. And that will be beneficial to all of us. Resources. Hopefully, if you found this webinar, you've been on our resources page, but there's lots of resources, as is visually seen by this slide, that there's lots of things going on here. The navigation for accessing SDPC is there. The resources that are available to you, the PDF documents, the actual Illinois NDPA agreement, some communications for templates for communicating with vendors if you're an originating district and want to get an agreement with them. And then also the YouTube playlists are here, and the slide deck is available here, as well as reasonable security, and also the ISBE links are down here under additional resources. So definitely utilize this page, make this a bookmark that you start when you start working in SDPC, so that you are constantly reminded that this is where the information's at, that you can get to future videos and past videos and all that kind of stuff. This is an example of one of the getting started documents. So if you're just getting started, this is a good place to start with that. One of those PDF documents that's there. Actually open up all three of them, see what their information is. And then also using the database. YouTube playlist is full of videos for getting started for agreements. So, and Beth shared with me last week a podcast / video YouTube video that the Future Ready Schools was doing, and one of our own here in Illinois, Phil Hintz, was part of that conversation and shared just about creating a culture of data privacy. So not just going through the motions of getting data privacy agreements, but actually doing it for the right reasons and getting that information. So I encourage you to check that video out and just listen to that as well. And Carl Hooker and Adam Fayal are great people to listen to as well, and to follow what they're doing around technology in schools as well. So the notice of parents' rights regarding covered information is available on the ISBE website now. So if you go to ISBE's website and then scroll down to the student online personal protection information, and then click on notice of parents' rights regarding covered information, that link is available there. So it just gives you information about what is requested. I haven't taken a lot of time to look through this, but I wanted to share that information with you, that it is available now it should be through press as well. So you can see that it's Exhibit 4 within the press policy 7345. So definitely check that link out, and more information on that page as well. And I'll make sure that should be linked to the resources in additional resources on the ISPA website. SOPPA for teachers, again, this is a webinar we did at the beginning of March, so that's available to you. And there should be some slides in there, as well as the on-demand video for that. Some events that are coming up for the LTC itself and for technology, because not everything revolves around SOPPA. There is still other technology going on. A couple different things that we're looking at. One is we're going to visit with NetRef about their bandwidth reporting free tool that they're sending out, that does speed tests for students, whether they're at home or whether they're at school, to help determine bandwidth reporting. Obviously, this would have been a great thing to have last spring, but I think it's still important and will help us with whatever term you want to use, whether it's homework gap or digital equity or whatever it is, as far as home use of determining what needs may be there. And also just having a conversation around the have I been pwned website and what it's capable of doing, and helping you track down different things that may be affecting your school district. And then as always, there's lots of things on the LTC website as far as events for your teachers, for your administrators, that can be taken advantage of. And then if you're part of any of our email lists or part of Tech Geeks or the community or even IETL, you would have seen that it was put out today that we have a new position at the LTC for cybersecurity specialist. So we're looking forward to bringing on someone that would help work through reasonable security practices for school districts in Illinois, developing those best practices and helping determine what it is that we can do as school districts to better protect our environments. So also, if you check out that link, there's more information about some of our technology coaching, instructional coaching positions that are available that we're putting together, where they work with multiple schools, in the sense that if a school doesn't have an instructional coach, then schools can share them through these positions. So there's a couple different areas around the state that are still looking for some positions for that. And then before we get into question and answer, I always like to get as much information as I can. Ultimately, really the only update I have is about Google. Google Legal is talking with attorneys representing Illinois schools right now. Obviously, the addendum that went out probably about 2 weeks ago already now caught the attention of attorneys, and they have looked at that, and they are having conversations with both as Google, as well as part of the IASB, Illinois Council of Learning or School Attorneys working group on SOPPA, are talking about what that looks like and what that means to Illinois schools. So that is in progress or in motion. And then I don't really have any update as far as the others go at this point. So if anybody does have information on any of those and wants to share it, I'm open to sharing that out as well. And then before we get into the question and answer, and this is always something that I kind of glance over at the end, but I moved it up. So if you do have questions, ask those questions, whether it's in this environment or whether it's through email or by scheduling a meeting with me. Again, those links for scheduling a meeting are on this slide, as well as the first slide of this, and also on the LTC website, and also in my email signature if you've ever gotten an email from me. Review the resources that we have. The videos are awesome. They have a lot of information in them. If you can't find specific things, reach out and we can pass those along. And then we won't meet next Tuesday, but the following Tuesday, July 13th, we will get together and have more information for you to talk about. All right. So questions, experiences, questions. 21 top questions. All right. So I gave the Google. I don't really have any updates on Apple at this point. I will make it a point to follow up with them as well. But ultimately, I don't want to get too worked up on any one vendor. I think they're all kind of the same when it comes to some of the stuff. Obviously, some of them have a little bit more impact in the way that we do things, but at the same time, whether it's a small application that uses student data or Google or Microsoft, I mean, it's we need to be worried about them kind of all the same. So don't get caught up into that to the point. There will be an agreement. There will be a mechanism for signing something. What that looks like and how it's done, I'm not sure how that's going to happen at this point, but it will happen. Does ISB have a template to share public or parent data requests? Was mentioned a few weeks ago, so I shared that as well. That is part of that listing that's on the ISBE slide, as well as the link that's on the additional resources. Would like to see more details about what other districts are posting regarding data breach details and inspecting your child's information. So the data breach details, I think, is something that I mean, I know it's something that we should be following up and getting more information about what it is that we should post. Obviously, I think, obviously, it is going to be up to your lawyer when it becomes a breach situation of what you post and how you post it and how you word it and all those things. So it's going to be important that that is done by your lawyer and who's represented you, because you don't want to say it's a breach until it is actually a breach. And you know it's a breach. It's an incident until you know that information's been pulled out of your system or something's been accessed and those types of things. So make sure that you don't jump the gun when it comes to some of that stuff, that you are definitely working with your attorneys with that. And very similar with the inspecting of your child's information. Obviously, you're going to want to make sure that you follow those guidelines that are in that document, and document as much as you can when you're doing that. Is there any templates to send out to teachers so that they understand their role in SOPPA compliance? Not officially. If there are things that people want to share, that's always been an option. There's a couple slides in the presentation that I shared for SOPPA for Teachers presentation, and mainly that is communication with their principals, with their curriculum teams, with their technology teams, letting them know what applications they're using, so that if a data privacy agreement is necessary, that it can be executed. But also, I think along those same lines is it's just like any other conversation that you have with teachers, is that it's a curriculum-based decision. How you're using that application, what you're using that application for. Are we using other similar applications? Does it work on our hardware? Does it work on our iPads or our Chromebooks or our Windows devices? All those same questions. Do we need to license it? Is it a paid solution? Is it something that we can sustain over time? So added to all those questions is there a need for a data privacy agreement, and do we have one? And then you check that off as well. And so communicating all of those things to your teachers is really just part of a overall process that hopefully you have in your district, and if not, you will work to develop one. If a vendor gave me a copy of another DPA and Exhibit E, but is not in the SDPC database, how do I upload it without database setting me as originating? You don't, ultimately, ultimately you don't. So ultimately, I don't know why I'm using the word ultimately. The originating district needs to upload that in order to make the system work well. So if until they have done that, and if you have information about that, you can email me and let me know, and I can help reach out to that school district and maybe help if they're not using the database, help them use the database in order to at least upload that, so that that process could be happen for you as a subscribing district. So definitely, just I guess the main thing is, it's not going to do any good to upload that as a originating agreement. That just complicates things. Ultimately, if everybody did that, then it would become a everybody would be uploading an originating agreement, and then there'd be no real sense of what the originating agreement was. So the best thing to do is pause, put that on a list, email me, let me know who that district is, rather than 10 or 15 people reaching out to that district and putting them in a bad position. Let me be that middle person to help with that process. So hopefully that answers that question. And I know there's situations where some of that's happened already, and there are just examples of similar situations where the originating agreement was uploaded by some other district, and that causes confusion when people go to subscribe to it, because it makes it confusing that you see one district, but then another district is the originating one. Does anyone have any examples of procedure steps for parents to review data and change it? I don't know that anybody has that at that point, because this resources just came out from the state board and from IASB. So until that's kind of been looked at and seen, but if you do have a process for how that is happening, that's definitely something we can share during these meetings and let people know what's happening. How do we get agreements for iPad apps? I'm not seeing many of these out there. Ultimately, that's I need to take a breath and before I answer questions and not use the word ultimately. I don't know why I'm doing that. And I guess I'm going to have to go back and look and see if I do that. I've done that in past sessions too. Agreements for any application, whether it's an iPad app or a Chromebook extension, is going to be determined by, does that app have personally identifiable student information associated with it? If it does, then you would need to get a data privacy agreement with them, which then you have to figure out who it is that you are going to enter into that agreement with by emailing somebody, communicating with somebody on the other end of those iPad apps, because obviously anybody can create an iPad app, anybody can create a Google extension. So it just really brings to light why it's important that we're concerned about student information. Is that, yes, it's difficult to maybe figure out who it is and how to get agreements, and maybe that's maybe just one thing that we need to stop and think about when we're signing up for these apps, and making sure that we know what they're doing and how they're doing it and all those types of things. So, and I think we can figure that out. Like, we're not going to figure that out right now in this time, but over time, as we continue to explore what it is that the data is that these sites are accessing and utilizing, then we can all be talking about that and actually know a little bit more than what we do right now, because I don't think we really know. And that's, I mean, that's on me too, from when I was a tech coordinator. It was easy just to sign up for apps and just add this app to this iPad, add this extension to this Chrome organizational unit, and just continue to add, and now we're kind of questioning those things. So I don't know that there's a good answer for that one either. How do you upload an Exhibit E that the auto Exhibit E creator isn't working for? Canvas, NCSO. Ultimately, if it's not working, there's that's something that we need to fix so that it does work. And because because we need to fix that, because if multiple people have uploaded originating agreements and you go to manually add an Exhibit E or a subscribing agreement, which would be the Exhibit E, the system doesn't know how to handle that at this point. So the only way to really truly know what originating agreement that you're connecting to is to use the auto Exhibit E creator. So if you're wanting to, so that's something I can check out and I will give an update on. But if you come across examples of those that it's not working or it's not uploaded correctly, then it needs to be fixed. It can't just be, you can't find just another way around it. It needs to be fixed before we can do it. So I will check that one out. Can we discuss the status that is being shared to parents? I'd like to hear what other schools are doing. Stacy, can you give?
Yeah.
Can you give a little bit
It
more
was
detail?
kind of like what I talked to you in our meeting, but then I went back to my boss and I didn't exactly know what to say. So, we have quite a bit of software that's in use, but it's out of scope.
Right.
So are we not supposed to even, like the example of the District 34 you had shown real quickly, it was like everything was approved. So does that mean that they're just not putting it out there, or can anybody else turn on their mic and let me know what you're doing if it's not approved yet?
Yeah, so if things aren't approved, or and also Stacy used the term in use but out of scope, basically if it's not collecting, or if it's not something that is under the idea that it needs to have an agreement with SOPPA, are you just saying in use no agreement, or are you what other ways are you communicating that to your parents or your teachers through the database?
Yeah, kind of like Butch said, we're going to be using Learn Platform for our public facing library link, and we've added some custom tags in there. Like we have one that basically says this is a tool that's going to be used, but just for technology purposes, not for instructional purposes, for things like our SIS. We want people to know that kids aren't logging into that. And then there are some that even in the SDPC, people say it doesn't collect data. So we have it's like compliant because it's no data collected. So we're using those statuses and have made a couple of custom. But right now, like I had put in the comments before, I'm not worrying about tools like Dropbox or Spotify or things like that, because they are, and that's in my triage tier. That's just further down my list of things to worry about.
Okay, I mean, some of ours aren't even like the big names. So, okay. Sorry, what do you mean by you're doing the custom tags? Is that within the database or just something different?
It's within Learn Platform. Learn Platform has an opportunity for us to put some tags either publicly facing or internal facing, where we could say things like they're pending. So we have a workflow right now. One of my partners is on this call also, where I will go in if I see someone else has put in the NDPA, where I can tag it as compliant, even if we haven't done the Exhibit E and done our portion yet, so that he knows when he gets to it that that tool has already been or has already submitted an NDPA. So that just happens to be the platform we're using. It has some custom tagging allowed.
Okay, thank you.
And I think definitely, and I did submit that as well, as far as in the enhancements to, that's a place where you can add that to Stacy, is in that form for SDPC, to make sure that they know that other people would be interested in having that. So definitely add that to that form too.
I'll just toss in there too, as somebody who's doing that sort of thing in the SDPC database. One of the options that you can choose is in use, no agreement, and then it'll show up as approved on your customized resource listing, but the agreement type will say in use, no agreement. And then if there's more detail that you want to provide, I'll usually put that in the purpose field. that's under contact info for the resource. That's where I usually put whatever the operator provided in the exhibit A. And if they didn't provide much, it's where I put in my little basic blurb about what this tool is. And I'll usually mention in there something about we don't create accounts for this tool, or some sort of language there. And then those tools, those operators also never have a magnifying glass in the data column because I don't add any data elements, whereas all of the ones that where they are collected have data elements. So up at the very top of the customized resource listing page where you can type in any sort of free form information you want, I have a little language up there that says, if there's not a magnifying glass under the data elements column, this resource does not collect any data from our students, but still may be used as a resource throughout the district. So yeah, there's no 100% great way to do that, but I think that kind of at least is a combination that works. Chris, if you sort by agreement status, but yeah, that ArcGIS one is an example of that right there.
Yes, I've looked at your page, Sean, actually, and you are very detailed. So thank you for that. I will piggyback off of that.
Sure.
Awesome.
I believe you can also
go ahead.
I believe you can also use, rather than the customized resource listing, if you're just provide the link for the district's list of agreements or list of resources, that will show statuses or agreement restrictions. For example, no data collected, approved no data collected. This can be used by teachers and parents to communicate, but not students or something like that. Whereas that wouldn't show in the customized resource listing on the front facing, just searching for the district and viewing all of their, requests. It will show there that way. So that's another option if you're just using SDPC.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks. All right. Did that help, Stacy?
Yes, thank you.
Or just create more questions, right? Are there DPAs for ISA test nav for state test? No, there's no DPAs for that. Ultimately, that will be something that the state board will have to have. State Board of Education will have to have DPAs with those sites, whether it's Pearson or WIDA or different things. So they will just ultimately point to ISBE's list of data privacy agreements for things like that. And it's also, I usually say at this point, it's important to keep that list of those different things that ISBE is doing, or IDPH, or other sites that you may have information on, other people that you supply information to, whether it's things like your PTO, if you send a file to them for certain things for communication to parents, making sure that you're listing that internally, at least, so that your administrators and everybody knows that that is happening and that that process is documented, so that it doesn't come back later to change things. And that question just moved to the top. What are about iStar, all those things? Those are all things that you should not. There's an exception for ISBE, so you don't have to have agreements with them with ISBE, and you wouldn't have to have agreements with those individual vendors because you're not the one that's communicating with those vendors. That is through ISBE. But to keep lists of those so that you know that that's the case, and when it comes up, you'll have an answer for that. For districts using Learn Platform, how are you planning on identifying which students are using which apps when a parent exercises their rights? Wow, that's a good question. And how are you going to do that with any system that you have, whether it's Learn Platform or SDPC or Catch On or privacy? Yeah. Those are definitely, that's definitely a question that is going to work into that process, and how, yeah, I don't even know how you begin to manage some of that. Does anybody have any feedback on that?
The negative Nelly on my team thinks that someone's going to ask by mid-July. I don't know that I believe him. He may chime in or not. And, you know, we thought we would work with our Google admin to see, because we could then see that student's account, and we could probably make a pretty good data picture of that specific student. But right now, personally, I'm kind of at a, I guess we're going to have to cross that bridge when we get there.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good, I mean, that, yeah, that's a deep question, deep thoughts. Can you walk through the exact process to load a vendor specific agreement to a district? No, piggybacking just for their personal agreement listing page. Yeah, I can do that. I will come back to that. Who needs to sign contract? SOPPA officer, superintendent. That is defined by you as a district, within your board policies. There's something in one of those board policies, in the 7345, that will talk about who will sign those contracts, sign those agreements. And then in the SDPC database, when you click on the actual sign Exhibit E document, that's where that's going to be, that's who's going to sign it. Who's going to sign it like that? I mean, ultimately, the reason why that's in there is so that ultimately teachers won't sign agreements on behalf of the district. So that's why they're wanting somebody specified or designated to be those people that are doing it. Does anyone have any ideas on the following JRTC programs? Not specifically, but I feel like those have always been, like, you're sharing directory information with some of those is the main thing that you're doing, and that all falls under FERPA. So we need to go back to FERPA school and get our friends from PTAC to come back and give us the answer of it depends, whether or not how that is. But I don't believe you'll have to have a data privacy agreement with them, but it does have to do with, and again, this is going to be one of those examples of documenting who you're giving information to and what they're doing. Saw a comment pop up there in the chat, but students have to log in and have accounts and created for these students in these programs. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I guess then the question becomes more of a legal question, and that's a lawyers, and ultimately, here I use that word again, you will want to try to send a Illinois NDPA to them and see what their reaction to that is, and try to get an agreement with them. It takes one district to get an agreement with them to show us that whether or not we need to have one or not. So I guess that's what we'll have to figure out. So Jen, I don't, sorry, I don't know how to go about doing that. If anybody else does have some ideas, it's just going to take some time to reach out to somebody that would have the answer, and I'm not sure who would have that at this point. Is it okay to piggyback on a DPA if a district doesn't use all of the tools listed? Like with Pearson of Discovery Ed, we use 2 of the 10 products listed, for example. Yes, I think that's okay to, as long as I mean, obviously you want to check with your lawyer, but if your product is listed in the Exhibit A, then it should be okay to use that agreement to piggyback on. Otherwise, those companies would need to have separate agreements in the system for each of their applications, and then you would just piggyback on each one of them individually. And ultimately, we could set the database up like that, but at the same time, that's going to be maybe just as confusing, but maybe it's better if we did have a separate listing for each one of those products and then make it easier to find them as well. So that's, I'm not that's something I can look at from a best practices standpoint of what other states have done too. If they upload those individually, even though it's the same document, but they would upload it as product A, and it's the same agreement, and then you'd subscribe to that one. But how would the company know that that's the one you're subscribing to, I guess, is ultimately what the question would be. But it should be okay to do that as long as that is listed in there. If we aren't an originating agreement, but a company provides us with an originating agreement, okay, so that we ultimately we need to have an agreement in the database that's the originating agreement. So if that is the case, definitely reach out to me with an example of that, and I can troubleshoot getting that in the system. Get the ability to upload the original agreement as a subscribing LAA return. Sometimes the auto exhibitee will grab the wrong district's original agreement. That should never have been the case. The ability to upload the original agreement as a subscribing LAA return. I think that's some of the confusion of what's going on in the system, is that ability should not have, I mean, that should never be happening, is that you should not upload the original agreement. You should just be uploading a single file that attaches to the full agreement of the originating agreement of the originating school district. So the auto exhibitee creator is the best. It should not, the auto exhibitee creator should not be attaching to the wrong district's original agreement. So if it is, we definitely reach out to me, because that's not, because the auto exhibitee creator is, you are specifically signing on to that agreement that's there, that's associated with that school district. And so that should be the cleanest way of uploading an original or exhibitee. So if that's not the case, then email me and we'll figure that out. Does the ISBE need to be included as an operator with an agreement? No, they do not. That's an exception within the law. How are others removing individual student data when requested by parents? I don't believe that, I mean, that's obviously going to be a process, but I don't know that that's going to be, that's going to be something you're going to have to work through on an individual application basis. What that information is, yeah, there's going to be a lot to discuss with that particular question. There are 2 DPAs for Cengage that have Exhibit E incorrectly filled out. It looks like there are many schools that piggybacked off that agreement. We'll look at that. Do we only need a list of the service providers we use for the district website, or the actual agreement? I'm not really sure what that question refers to. If you're still on the conversation or in the call here, if you want to clarify that. Is blacklisting tools, sites, etc. recommended? That's going to be up to each district as well. You're going to have a hard time blocking all the tools that are available. Ultimately, it's going to come down to communication with your teachers, with your students, with your administration, with your technology, and just knowing what applications you're using. And if you are using applications that are sharing personal and identifiable information, then you need to have a data privacy agreement. But as far as playing whack-a-mole with that, like, I think you're going to have a difficult time doing that and spend a lot of time doing that. Does the notice of parents' right need to be published in the school handbook? I don't know that it needs, at this point, I don't know if it needs to be published in the student handbook. But I think you just want to link it, if nothing else, on your page that deals with student data privacy. I mean, ultimately, you may need to eventually get that into part of your handbook, but it's also going to be part of your board policy. So that should be there as well. Just so I heard you correctly, we do not need to piggyback off a co-op agreement for a product we use of theirs. We should get it listed, get listed, but we should list it. I don't know what that says. But yes, if the co-op is using an application for a certain thing and your students are in that co-op and they're using that application, that co-op is responsible for the data privacy agreement with that particular application. The individual school district, obviously, if you know that your students are using that, put that in a list somewhere, or at least point to the agreements that are in place with the co-op, so that you at least know that your students' data are there, and that will help you communicate with your parents and ultimately your administration and everybody as well. And there, I mean, depending on what the application is, I mean, there's all kinds of, it depends with all of this. There's a lot of gray area in all of this. So the exact process for and if somebody is still here about the district website, I'm not sure if it's what the question is, but can you walk through the exact process to load a vendor specific agreement to a district, no piggybacking, just for their personal agreement listing? All right, so, and I'll link this in the video as well. So if, I know we're getting up against time, but let's see here. So if you add a new agreement, this is where you're going to upload, and notice the circling here. So I'm figured out that Tuesdays is the worst day to be in the database, because it seems like, because we're doing all things SOPPA on Tuesdays, people think about doing SOPPA on Tuesdays, so they do it in probably these next few days as people are thinking they're going to get completely done with everything SOPPA before July 1. The system's going to be even more overwhelmed. But yes, I have a contract, meaning an agreement, and some of the verbiage and some of these things, like, we question that, but that's because it's a shared system across the country with all kinds of school districts across the country and multiple states using this. So the verbiage is a little bit different. All right, so just explaining what these agreements are here, and these are your agreements that you would upload. So if you do have an Exhibit E, so if you are the originating school district, you have an exhibit, your school district is listed on the front cover, the Exhibit E is signed by the vendor, you would use either this one if it doesn't have an Exhibit H, you would use this one if it does have an Exhibit H. So those are your two choices for uploading as an originating district. Has an Exhibit H, does not have an Exhibit H. These are really not going to be used as much, and I mentioned it a couple times, that if there's multiple originating agreements, it's difficult to know which, the system has a hard time knowing which one, if you go through this process, to pick for attaching it to. Whereas if you use this has been replaced. This was originally the method for subscribing. The method for subscribing now, and should be, the auto exhibitee creator. If the auto exhibitee creator is not working and there is an originating agreement in there, we need to fix that. But ultimately, that's the way subscribing should be done. It's the easiest way to do it. It's the most accurate way to do it. You're going to be happier with that solution. And if there is no exhibitee and you're using, and the format is, so in the sense of GoGuardian, they're using the national standard agreement, but there is no exhibit E, so that's what the no exhibit is referring to, exhibit E. If there is a exhibit H, then it's a vendor specific. So in the case of GoGuardian, this would be your choice. So you would click on this one. If does not have an exhibit H, then you would put it using this one. And then in the case of in case of Khan Academy, it's not based on the national agreement in any way. So you would just upload it through other type of agreement and use signed agreement. So when you use vendor specific, you're basically just going to upload the full document that you have that's signed, and then fill out the same information that you would fill out for these other four or of these four agreements. So you're going to select your resource. So GoGuardian. Agreement type, it's vendor specific. It's based on the Illinois NDPA, but there's no exhibit. So that no exhibit means no exhibit E. The date approved, you put that information in there and then just upload the signed agreement. So upload the signed agreement, choose your grade levels, your content information, anything that's in green is going to be on your public page. So you would want to do that. Some of these things don't necessarily, you don't have to fill all these things out. It's up to you what you fill out and what you don't. But I think date approved and date expires is part of the requested information. And then when you continue, you'll fill out a couple more fields similar to these, but that's the main thing, is that you're uploading the full document, you're choosing the resource, choosing the exhibit, and then it should appear as a vendor specific for Illinois NDPA. So I'm not sure if the person that asked that question is still on here. Also, there's videos that are part of the playlist that would show you how to do that, and also the full length manage NDPAs or managing your SOPPA agreements will be a part of the playlist as well. All right. Yeah. The best way to do this changing of the agreement type is to manage your agreements. Ultimately, it requires you to, when you're in manage agreements, if you change agreement type, you can do it through there. There are a lot more choices when you're choosing change agreement type. And we'll wait for a couple seconds here. So Scott, you can find the Illinois NDPA agreement on the resources page. So the Illinois NDPA agreement is right here. So you can download that document, fill out your information, and then send it to whatever vendor you want to send it to. All right, so when you go into change your agreement type, There are several types of agreements here that aren't relevant to, but it should be basically the same ones that show up when you upload the agreement. There's a couple of extra ones that are sticking out in here. So these top ones are the main ones, and then this one over here, these, ignore these. I need to get these out of here. But it's based on the national agreement. This is where you would change it to vendor specific or standard agreement. So that would be your places to do that. And then it will ask you to upload those agreements again. So you would need to have those documents available to upload again. But that would allow you to change those. All right. So hopefully you got something out of today. The recording will be available. If you do have questions between now and June, July 13th, definitely reach out, schedule a time on my calendar, even though it will be limited over the next few weeks. Definitely share those things with me. Let's see. All right, so I'm going to stop the recording, but I will continue to answer questions here.